welcome to podcast number 9, How We Transform Our Age of Stupidity into an Age of Consciousness. Today's SmartKnowledgeU podcast is brought to you by Audible.com, where you can download over 150,000 titles for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, and MP3 player. You can get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial by visiting www.audibletrial.com/SmartKnowledgeU. So as I always do, I usually recommend a companion audiobook for today's podcast, and the one I recommend today is How to Go Big, Make Bank, and Better the World, narrated by Steven Kotler. But you don't have to pick this book. If you want to pick another book, you can pick any book of your choice, audiobook of your choice for free, just by visiting audibletrial.com/SmartKnowledgeU. And in addition, if you want to support us in helping to keep these podcasts going and podcast free, please search lulu.com, Lulu.com, or Amazon.com for my book on how to analyze the global monetary system and global banking system from a critical perspective and what we can do to change this nefarious system. And my book is titled The Golden Gift. So before I begin, some people have asked why I haven't made a penny off of any of my vids. I literally have not made 1 cent because some people say, hey, some of your vids have gotten quite a few views, like 50, 60,000 views, and quite a number of others have between like 5 and 10,000 views. The reason is AdSense, because once Google bought YouTube, even though I've had my YouTube channel for, I believe, like around 6 years or so, or 5 years, and I haven't made 1 penny from any video, is because one of AdSense's criteria, or Google says one of the criteria to have an AdSense account, which you must have to monetize your videos, even though there have been ads showing, they won't pay you anything. So I might demonetize everything, because why am I going to help Google out when they haven't paid me a cent? Is that you have to have an AdSense account. Now they said, Google says you cannot criticize any industry as part of your YouTube channel or the websites that's affiliated with the AdSense account. And they haven't directly told me, but since they refuse, like the 10 times I tried to add an AdSense account, they basically, in oh so many words, told me that because you're attacking the banking industry, we refuse to let you monetize your account. So I'm going to give it one final try to get around that. If not, then I'm just going to take I'm not going to monetize any of my videos anymore because I'm not making any money. I haven't earned literally I've not earned 1 penny from any of these videos. So if you can help us out by buying our book or by going to our blog and donating, that would be great. And my blog is smartknowledgeu.com/blog, and there's a ability to donate to us so we can keep spending the dozens of hours it takes us to produce all this information for free every week. And also, please keep asking questions. Sometimes I don't have the time to answer all the questions, so my staff will try to answer questions on YouTube. But I try to get around because I know people want to hear from me. But when neither myself or my limited staff have time to answer questions on YouTube, please do keep asking questions because we will notate that. So I'll just eventually make a video in which I'll just read the questions that we haven't had the opportunity to answer online, and then I will just answer them within a video or a podcast or something like that. Okay, so in the first part of this podcast, I want to talk about why I believe we live in an age of stupidity. And then please do stay tuned for the second part of this podcast, because then I'll talk about how I believe we can transform our age of stupidity into an age of consciousness, because certainly there is a swell of consciousness that is happening right now, but I believe there's far too much stupidity there that is kind of impeding our ability to make progress in this sense. So why do I think we live in an age of stupidity? Well, there's a whole number of reasons, but I'm just going to discuss a few of the reasons in this video because the number of reasons are really overwhelming. But recently, as an example of one of the reasons I think we're living in an age of stupidity, I watched a video about a nail salon in the US that was named Aegis Nail Salon. But of course, this business existed far before ISIS even made it into the news, and I imagine, I'm not positive, but I imagine they named the nail salon after the Egyptian god of Isis because she is supposed to be the Egyptian god of beauty and health and all that other stuff, which makes sense to name a beauty and nail salon after this Egyptian god. But recently I saw a video in which the owner was relaying stories of repeated harassment after harassment from Americans that called her a terrorist and other offensive names and yelled at her just because they thought from the name of her salon that she was associated in helping the ISIS terrorist group, which is unbelievable to me how stupid some Americans can be. And she went on to state that her revenues decreased by 30% until she finally had to change the name of her business. And of course, the stupidities, that's just like Americans don't have a monopoly on stupidity. There's stupidity in every nation, every country that is basically this baseline, lowest common denominator, stupidity. But it's also reminding me of the news stories I read post 9/11, when Americans physically assaulted Sikhs, Indian Sikhs, and they destroyed many of their businesses as well because they thought they were Muslims due to the turbans Sikhs wear because of religious reasons. But furthermore, even if they identified Muslims correctly, which they weren't because they thought Sikhs were Muslims, and they destroyed the businesses of Muslims, this would also be an illustration of the immense stupidity. I'm talking barely above single-cell amoeba intelligence illustrated by these idiots. Because when Timothy McVeigh, who was a white Christian American, was found guilty of bombing Oklahoma City back in, when was it, 1990 something, I believe, and his actions ended up murdering 168 people and injuring 680 more. Did the same idiots that attacked Muslims after 9/11 go on a rampage against Christians and destroy churches, or did they go attack white people en masse and destroy businesses of white people like they attack Muslims? Of course not. So what is giving rise to this rampant stupidity that we see everywhere, all of us see everywhere? So, the counter, of course, to these illustrations of acts of stupidity that I'm going to discuss in this podcast is that people say, oh, these acts are just isolated and the majority of people are not like this at all. Well, of course, I believe the majority of people aren't like this. We'd be in a lot of trouble if the majority of people in the world were like this. I think a lot of people would then be taking that one-way ticket to Mars and try to start a new colony of sensible people. The majority of people were like this. But while I do agree with this assessment, it doesn't mean that we're not living in an age that is suffering from an epidemic of stupidity. So let me provide a few more examples. Recently, I saw a trailer when I was in the movies for a new movie coming out called Mad Max Fury. And actually, it may have already come out, I'm not positive. But then I learned that there are some that are gaining a wide following on the internet that are urging a boycott of Mad Max Fury because they say it's feminist propaganda. And one of the most popular articles about this particular idiotic topic was scripted by someone named Aaron Clary. And the amazing thing is that he admits he's not even seen the movie. So he's one of those idiots in this epidemic of stupidity that criticizes something without even seeing it. So he's basing his criticism on the movie based upon a 2-minute trailer. So this is exactly what he said. He said, quote, Charlize Theron kept showing up a lot in the trailers while Mad Max seemed to have cameo appearances. Charlize Theron's character sure talked a lot during the trailers because, of course, women aren't supposed to talk ever, right? That's just my commentary. Sorry, but get back to what he said. He said, while I don't think I've heard one line from Mad Max. And finally, Charlize Theron's character barked orders to Mad Max. Nobody barks orders to Mad Max. End quote. So, of course, it must be a feminist propaganda movie because a female character is actually strong in a movie and it actually talks. So here's the problem with the age of stupidity today. Again, someone as stupid as Aaron Clary is willing to criticize something blindly, in this case, a movie, without even seeing it. And this happens all the time. You see this on Fox News where people criticize something and then someone that's brought on to debate them says, have you even read anything this person has said, or you read this book that you're criticizing? And people admit they haven't read it. They're just basing it, but they say, oh, I've heard other people say this. So we live in an age where people are so willing to be so opinionated about something with zero experience with it. That to me is an age of stupidity. And in fact, it's happened to me plenty of times on this YouTube channel, because when my staff members go through it to look at the comments, they told me that one time there was a comment of someone that had basically was spewing nonsense and lies in the comment section, saying, oh, he's just another gold and silver expert, because I believe it was one of my gold and silver videos. And they told me, he said something to the effect like, another Wall Street crook with no track record to speak of, he's just trying to rip people off. When in fact, all this person had to do was visit my website, because the fact sheets of my Platinum membership and my Crisis Investment Opportunities newsletter that contains my track record every year since we launched in 2007 is there. But since this person was too lazy to conduct 1 minute research, go to my website, which is always listed in the details of not only is it only listed in the details of the YouTube video that he was watching, it's probably like scrolling across the bottom of the screen as well. And he wasn't willing to do 1 minute research, but yet was willing to be so willing to criticize me without even knowing the truth. So let's move on. So in a recent podcast, I've explained how the powers that be use education to dumb us down. Now, it's been revealed that they've been using art to do so as well. As recently, it's been revealed that the CIA and the bankers, the Rockefellers, but I've always known actually the Rockefellers had their hands deep into the art movement, that the CIA funded the popularity of modern art. So that probably explains why, even though I love art and I frequently would go to art museums, that I somehow had a revulsion to modern art. And I've never been a huge fan. And in fact, I remember when I was in uni, I went to visit another friend of mine in uni at the time who was attending the Savannah College Savannah College of Art and Design, I believe was the name of it. And it's like the biggest art school in Savannah, Georgia. And anyways, we attended a art exhibit in which one of our professors was also there. And I remember I told the professor, because the professor was raving on and on and on about this art exhibit, and basically to me it had the same type of art that Damien Hirst produces, like his polka dot paintings, Jeff Koons produces with his metallic balloon art, dog sculptures, Andy Warhol with just replicating the Mona Lisa in different colors, and having an Ankawara, if you're not familiar with him, he paints date paintings. He actually paints the date. So the date I am making this release at a later date is Sunday, May 17th, 2015. So he would actually paint 17 May 2015, and these date paintings sell for like $300,000. Actually, that was in a book I read called The $6 Million Shark about 6 or 7 years ago. So I'm sure these date paintings with the inflated runaway inflation of the art world are probably selling for over $1 million a piece now. So it's crazy. And then these art critics, I read an art review of him recently where this critic was marveling that Ankawara works on canvases of different sizes, and when he travels, as he often does, he adjusts his language and syntax to reflect the host country's conventions. For example, when he was in Reykjavik, Iceland, he painted a date painting that said 26 AG 1995, and when he went to Monte Carlo, he painted something that said 13 instead of June, as would be the custom in the Western United States. He painted 13 JUIN 2006, and this critic is marveling over this, which is so asinine. And I've never been attracted, because the thing that I told this professor of my friends when I was in uni way back when is that I said he was going marveling on and on about how great this art was. I told him I don't get it. I really don't get it, because I told him straight up to his face. I said, any art that a 5-year-old can replicate, which I think a 5-year-old can replicate, a lot of this art in this exhibit, they can replicate Damien Hirst's stupid polka dot paintings, which he doesn't even paint, by the way. He gets someone else to paint it and just signs it, and then it goes for $500,000 or $1 million. But if he doesn't sign it, it will sell for like $5 because it's the junk that it is. Then afterwards, my friend said, hey, she said, I really liked the way you stood up to my professor and you challenged him. And I said, look, your professor, just because he's this authority figure, it's a whole dumbing down of education that I also made a podcast about, how education, the institutional academia system, is meant to pacify us and to make us obey authority no matter what. I said, that doesn't make your professor infallible. You know, if you have an opinion, you think your professor's opinion is stupid, then you should speak up too. I mean, I know it might get you an F in the class because that's the way the educational system has been designed now. If you disagree with your all-powerful, all-knowing professor, then he will fail you. Whereas if you just spit back what he wants to hear or she wants to hear, then you get an A. But I mean, it's a price for maintaining your individuality and not getting dumbed down by the system like the powers that be want us or want to happen in our educational system. So in any event, the CIA has come out. Let me find this article where it said modern art was a CIA weapon. So let me just read you a part of this article. It says, for decades in art circles, it was either a rumor or a joke, but now it is confirmed as a fact. The Central Intelligence Agency used modern art, including the works of such artists as Jackson Pollock, who's another artist I've always told my friends that are artists too. I never understood these splash paintings. If a monkey can do it, then why would these paintings sell for millions of dollars? Robert Motherwell, Willem de Kooning, and Martha Rothko as a weapon in the Cold War. In the manner of a Renaissance prince, except that it acted secretly, the CIA fostered and promoted American abstract expressionist painting around the world for more than 20 years. The connection is improbable. This was a period in the 1950s and 1960s when the great majority of Americans disliked or even despised modern art. That was even before I was born, so I know there's a reason that I grew up despising modern art as well, because it was this whole CIA initiative to dumb people down, to dumb the art down, to dumb the music down, to dumb education down. So President Truman summed up the popular view when he said, if that's art, then I'm a Hottentot. Actually, I don't even know what a Hottentot is. And as for the artists themselves, many were ex-communists, barely acceptable in America, the McCarthyite era, normally likely to receive U.S. government banking. Why did the CIA support them? Because in the propaganda war with the Soviet Union, this new artistic movement could be held up as proof of the creativity, the intellectual freedom, and the cultural power of the US. Russian art, strapped into the communist ideological straitjacket, could not compete, end quote. So that is just crazy. And in fact, I'll put in the link below. I've actually made a series of, it's not my podcast, but a video series called The Age of Deception or something like that. Can't remember off the top of my head because I made it a couple of years ago, in which I criticized modern art profusely. And if you want to check that out, I will put it in the YouTube description as well. Okay, so let's go on. I'll just discuss a couple other things that I feel I've just been very, very reminiscent and very indicative of this age of stupidity that we are now living in. So let's look at just the popularity of plastic surgery now. So plastic surgery is booming right now in South Korea. And the percent, I'm aware of this because when my grandmother was still alive and lived in Seoul, I used to go visit Seoul a lot. And the crazy thing is that, you know, people have said that the percent of prisoners, like per capita, that a nation imprisons is reflective of the degree of freedom within that country. Now, many of you listening to this podcast already know that per capita, the United States imprisons by far, the U.S. will say is tyrannical, like Russia, by far more prisoners per capita than any other nation in the world. Now, I will say that the percent of people that get plastic surgery in a country is also reflective of the spiritual emptiness of that country, because people are so empty on the inside that they're trying to make themselves beautiful on the outside without ever fixing the problems of beauty on the inside that they possess. So I'm going to insert a photo right now of Miss Korea contestants in 2013. I'm also going to include a couple before and after photos of the South Korean beauty pageant contestants, so you can see how drastically they alter their looks. So if you're listening to this podcast on iTunes, just bear with us because you're going to have about 20 seconds of silence following right now. Okay, so you just saw photos of the South Korean beauty contestants that all look the same. And then you saw before and after photos, and with some look drastically different before and then after. But the astounding thing to me is that the after pictures all look the same. Even though the before pictures, many of the contestants look nothing like their after pictures. So they all strive to some weird, warped, uniform idea of beauty that they have in South Korea, because they all want to look the same. Whatever happened to individuality and uniqueness as being desirable qualities? That is astounding to me. So if you're listening to this podcast on iTunes, you won't be able to see it, but if you're listening to it on YouTube, like, come back to your screen and take a look at this, because it's insane. They all look the same. Go back and look at that photo again. They look exactly the same. You might as well give the Miss Korea the winner to any one of those, because there's really very little difference. They all get the same plastic surgery. They have the same lips, the same eyelids, the same eyes, the same size cheekbones, the same chin, and it's crazy. And you know, when I said that the epidemic of plastic surgery is a reflection of spiritual emptiness, I think it really does reflect that, because the interesting thing is, I was just wondering, that was my first intuition and my first conclusion when I discovered how many people in South Korea get plastic surgery. And I thought there would be a link to suicide. So first of all, in the United States, when we look at the number of people that undergo invasive cosmetic surgical procedures, in 2009, which is the most, I'm sure there's probably more recent info than this, but there was what I could find on a cursory look, was data that went back to 2009 is the most recent. They said 42 out of every 10,000 Americans got an invasive cosmetic surgical procedure. So in China, they ranked third in the world for total number of surgical procedures, but of course, because there's 1.4 billion Chinese people per capita, it's not that high. It's only 9 out of every 10,000. But in Korea, you want to know what it was in South Korea? The capital of plastic surgery in the entire world. Remember, in China, it's 9 out of 10,000. America, 42 out of 10,000. And Korea, 74 per 10,000. Now, when I looked at highest suicide rates in the entire world, compared to other OECD countries, which is Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, basically all the countries in the Americas, some countries in South America, all of the entire European Union, all developed countries in Asia and Australia are included in these. So it's quite a number. Only basically it's the countries of Africa and about 2/3 of South America that aren't included in OECD countries. Compared to all OECD countries, South Korea's female suicide rate marks the top at 15 suicides per 100,000 deaths. And that doesn't surprise me, because earlier I made another video just about suicide, about the high rates of suicide among South Korean pop and film stars that seemingly have it all, as well as recently that South Korean supermodel Doll Kim that was rising to the ranks of any other supermodel in this world, who killed herself, I believe, at age 20. So interestingly enough, countries with the lowest suicide rates, you want to know what they are? Jamaica, Syria, Jordan, Egypt, Grenada, St. Kitts and Nevis, Antigua and Barbuda, Nepal, and Haiti, which all happen to rank amongst the poorest countries in the world. So this is something that that proves that happiness does not come from money alone, although obviously money is necessary to not be stressed out, a certain level of money. Now, also, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Gangnam Style, that music video from Psy that went viral, and I believe, I'm just going to look it up real quickly, because I believe it went so viral, it almost verges on the border of insanity how viral it went. Let's see, Gangnam Style. because I believe over 1 billion people. I'm not kidding. Over 1 in 7 people. Well, I don't know if YouTube. I don't think YouTube actually counts repeat watches. So I think that really would be almost one. Oh, it's actually 2.3 billion views. That's crazy. That's crazy. 2.3 billion views right now for Psy's Gangnam Style. Now, again, how does this tie back to the Aegis Stupidity? We live, 2.3 billion people watched that, but how many people actually really understood it? Because I've seen interviews with Psy where Psy admits that he's not embracing the materialism and the wealth of high society today, but he was actually making fun of it and he was parodying it. But I don't think hardly any of the 2.3 billion people that watched it actually understood that. And I think that people, because we live in Aegis Stupidity and pop culture, that unfortunately many of us were just too stupid to understand that's a parody. In fact, Korean blogger Jae Kim wrote at her site, My Dear Korea, that she wrote in Korea, it's her blog is in Hangul, but I'm going to translate it to English. She said, in Korea, there's a joke poking fun at women who eat 2,000 won, about $2, because it's about 1,000 won per dollar, ramen for lunch, and then spend 6,000 won on Starbucks coffee. They're called soybean paste women for their propensity to crimp on essentials so they can overspend on conspicuous luxuries, of which coffee is, believe it or not, one of the most common, end quote. So another Korean blogger said, the number of coffee shops has gone up tremendously, particularly in Gangnam. Coffee shops have become the place where people go to be seen and spend ridiculous amounts of money. She also said Koreans, this gentleman also said Koreans have been caught up in the spending to look wealthy, and Gangnam has really been the leading edge of that. I think a lot of what Psy is pointing out is how silly that is. The whole video is about him thinking he's a hotshot, but then realizing he's just, at a children's playground. Or thinking he's playing polo or something bougie like that and realizes he's on a merry-go-round. So the crazy thing is it's the same in Shanghai, because I've been to Shanghai a couple of times for business. And in Shanghai, every Starbucks I went into was super crowded. And when I say we live in the age of stupidity, for those that disagree with me, we have allowed coffee to become a status symbol. Is there anything more stupid than that? And it's just not in Asia where this, mentality of stupidity has blossomed. But it's also, definitely in the United States, because when I lived in Los Angeles, me and my friends, we used to say there are $30,000 millionaires there. Again, people that were driving around in expensive leases of Mercedes S-Classes or 7 Series BMWs, but then lived in a 300 square foot studio so they could afford to build this illusion like they're super wealthy when they're not. Okay, the last point I want to make, which will be the last point of part 1 of this podcast before I go into what the solutions may be to this age of stupidity and how we transform the age of stupidity into an age of consciousness, is I want to address the author. It's this really, really popular author and philosopher today that has a lot of fanboys. And when I say fanboys, I usually use that word with a little bit of derision, meaning people that just follow someone that's become popular without really doing any type of critical thinking for themselves. And his name's Sam Harris. Now, I want to discuss, if you're a fan of Sam Harris, please don't shut off my podcast now, because I have a lot of valuable things to say in the second half of this podcast. But please rather just stay along for my criticisms and then put below if you think I'm wrong. We can have an adult discussion about this. Now, I'm just going to discuss the specific things I've read Sam Harris say, and we'll even read his comments verbatim. So I'll discuss things that really stand alone on their own merit and that cannot be taken out of context, as things often are when people criticize others. So I watched a debate between Noam Chomsky and Sam Harris because they've been really, really getting into it, in which Sam Harris argued that intent always supersedes results, and that if your intention is good, then that is enough to make the action legitimate and right, no matter how horrible and atrocious the outcome. So I wanted to actually go to the emails between Noam Chomsky and Sam Harris before they even got into this debate. So no one can say I misrepresented Sam Harris's views. I'm going to read verbatim without changing a single word of what he wrote. He posted it on his own website, on his website called Project Reason. Okay, quote, take the bombing of the Al-Shifa Pharmaceuticals plant. According to Chomsky, the atrocity of September 11th pales in comparison with that perpetrated by the Clinton administration in August 1998. But now let us ask some very basic questions that Chomsky seems to have neglected to ask himself. What did the U.S. government think it was doing when it sent cruise missiles into Sudan? Destroying a chemical weapon site used by Al-Qaeda? Did the Clinton administration intend to bring any emphasize the word intend to bring about the deaths of thousands of Sudanese children? No. Was our goal to kill as many Sudanese as we could? No. Were we trying to kill anyone at all? Not unless we thought members of Al-Qaeda would be at the Al-Shifa facility in the middle of the night. Asking these questions about Osama bin Laden and the 19 hijackers puts us in a different moral universe entirely. End quote. Okay, so he actually really believes that, obviously. Okay, I'm going to keep reading. Quote, if we are inclined to follow Chomsky down the path of moral equivalence and ignore the role of human intentions, we can forget about the bombing of the Al-Shifa plant, because many of the things we did not do in Sudan had even greater consequences. What about all the money and food we simply never thought to give the Sudanese prior to 1998? How many children did we kill? That is not saved just by living in blissful ignorance of the conditions of Sudan. Surely, if we had all made it a priority to keep death out of Sudan for as long as possible, untold millions could have been saved from whatever it was that wound up killing them. We could have sent teams of well-intentioned men and women into Khartoum to ensure that the Sudanese wore their seatbelts. Are we culpable for all the preventable injury and death that we did nothing to prevent? End quote. Now, to even this argument out, because I'm trying to be as fair as possible before I go into how silly and illogical those arguments are, Harris wrote, quote, there's no doubt that the United States has much to atone for, both domestically and abroad. In this respect, we can more or less swallow Chomsky's thesis whole. To produce this horrible confection at home, start with our genocidal treatment of the Native Americans, add a couple hundred years of slavery, along with our denial of entry to Jewish refugees fleeing from the death camps of the Third Reich, sterner collusion with a long list of modern despots, and our subsequent disregard for their appalling human rights records, and add our bombing of Cambodia and the Pentagon Papers states, and then on top with our recent refusals to sign the Kyoto Protocol for greenhouse emissions, to support any ban on landmines, and to submit ourselves to the rulings of the International Criminal Court. The result should smell of death, hypocrisy, and fresh brimstone. End quote. So, our reporters will say, see, he's reasonable. He's not denying the U.S. government and military has committed atrocities abroad back then and even today, and denying the ban on landmines and denying the Kyoto Protocol. But, of course, he's not going to deny this because these facts are documented. Only an idiot would try to deny facts that have been repeatedly documented by photos, internal documents, and dozens of independent investigative journalists that you can't refute logically. But there's an extreme absence of logic if we believe an omission of facts surrounding a topic of debate strengthens an erroneous argument about the same topic. Central bankers and their cronies mix facts and lies all the time to confuse the populace. This deliberate mixing of facts and lies is called disinformation, and is a well-known disinformation tactic of agent provocateurs and basically, you know, other people just seeking to spread propaganda. So let's return to Sam Harris's original premise that the U.S. government has moral supremacy because it believed government officials and the president believed they were destroying an Al-Qaeda weapon site, but instead ended up, in reality, destroying a pharmaceuticals plant that eventually resulted in the deaths of thousands of Sudanese children who no longer had access to medicine this plant produced. Harris argues that one cannot condemn the atrocious results of these acts because it was all done with good faith and good intent, thus arguing that intent is more important than the result. Then Harris goes on to argue that Islam is a morally deficient religion compared to Christianity and says, quote, it is time for us to admit that not all cultures are at the same stage of moral development. This is a radically impolitic thing to say, of course, but it seems as objectively true as saying that not all societies have equal material resources, end quote. Again, How can you say it's objective means it's fact? This is your subjective opinion, Sam Harris. So again, it is so deceitful to say that, because this is why that particular comment is ridiculous. Because Harris doesn't really believe in any type of personal responsibilities for one's actions, but falsely argues that intent gives rise to moral superiority that renders atrocious results of well-intended actions to be acceptable, he can't see the errors of extending the actions of extreme fundamentalist Muslims to all Muslims, while at the same time he ignores extending the atrocities committed by extreme fundamentalist Christians in history to all Christians, and claiming that the largely Christian Western American civilization is morally superior to the Middle Eastern Muslim civilization. Furthermore, he doesn't even consider the roots of extreme Muslim fundamentalism today, because again, there's no personal responsibility ever as long as your intentions are good. So he would again be supremely opposed to the idea of CIA blowback is ever being the fault of the people that produce the blowback. No, no, no. It's just the fault of the evil people that are doing this. So again, if you looked at the roots of extreme Muslim fundamentalism today, the fact is, these are facts, the US supported, funded, trained, and armed radical jihadists in Afghanistan to fight the Russians back during the war when Russia invaded Afghanistan. And in fact, many well-respected historians today attribute the rise of radical, extreme fundamentalist Muslims today to the fact that the US funded these radical jihadists that ended up killing most of the well-respected moderate Muslims in Middle Eastern countries. So in fact, the US created this branch of extreme fundamentalist Muslims by funding and arming them, and then they ended up killing most of the moderate Muslims. In fact, there's even, this is indisputable, because there's video, I see video of Zbigniew Brzezinski, who's employed by the US government, talking to radical jihadists in Afghanistan, saying, your cause is just. He said, God is on your side. That's what he was saying. You had a U.S. government official, a high-ranking official saying, your cause is just, to these radical fundamentalist Muslims that are the same as ISIS today, and he was saying, God is on your side. Because intent was okay. He was trying to fight the Russians. It doesn't matter that they ended up killing all the moderate Muslims and fomenting a very radical branch of Islam that exists today, now that Sam Harris wants to say is deplorable, and that we have no role in creating the US government because the intent was pure in trying to defeat the Russians. So the fact that this devolved into ISIS and other fundamentalists I deplore and call barbaric is totally irrelevant. So really, can you see how idiotic, even if you're a fan of Sam Harris, can you see how idiotic and devoid of logic Harris's arguments are? And in addition, I didn't even go back and address the point yet that he's saying that it's equivalent for making us responsible for all the thousands of deaths, making the US, holding the US government accountable for the thousands of deaths that resulted from bombing a pharmaceutical company. The same as not giving money in prior years and allowing these people to starve. They're totally unrelated. It's not related. The thousands of people that died due to the destruction of a pharmaceuticals plant that produced medicine critical to saving people, saving children from diarrhea, from E. coli, and other diseases that were easily preventable, has nothing to do with thousands of children dying from an event that had nothing to do with a bombing of the pharmaceuticals plant. If you are just well-versed in logic, you could destroy that reasoning in a second too. But yet, I discussed that in a podcast a couple of podcasts ago called Deciphering the Language of Lies. Despite all this, Harris comically and absurdly titles his website, largely devoid of reason, Project Reason. And again, if you want to know what I mean by the language of lies, please just listen to the podcast available on YouTube, on iTunes. I posted called Deciphering the Language of Lies. In any event, you know what Harris's reasoning sounds like to me? Arguments where intent can supersede the results of atrocities and horrors inflicted upon humanity. Humanism. which again is apparently a term that was coined by the NWO, as it is as deceptive on the surface level as any other deceptive language like Project Reason, because humanism sounds good on the surface, right? It sounds so much like humanity that people might blindly believe that humanism is about promoting humanity without researching it first. But I'll tell you what humanism is about. Humanists argue that there cannot be such thing as general morality that applies to, any situation, because every case is separate and specific. So every case must be examined with the intent of that action to judge whether it's right or wrong. So in other words, you can't say that rape is wrong in every single case, because you must judge intent first to say that rape is wrong. But, I could destroy Harris's arguments with one simple example. If intent is all that matters, then every drunk driver that kills someone should never, ever go to jail if you are using the same arguments as Sam Harris. I mean, ever go to jail. Because no drunk driver ever gets in his or her car with the intent of murdering someone. If they did, I believe they would kill multiple people every night, because they would just get in their car drunk and plow into multiple cars on their way home. So when arrested after plowing into someone and killing someone while driving drunk, according to Harris, this person should be able to plea in court, "Your Honor, I may have killed someone because I have no sense of personal responsibility for my actions. And yes, I made the choice to get plastered and then enter a hulking mass of metal that I knew could kill someone if I didn't operate it properly. And yes, I knew that I was nowhere close to being able to operate it properly, but I never intended to plow into Miss Miller's car at 60 miles an hour head on, and I never intended to kill her. And I promise you, even if I kill other people in the future drunk driving, I will never do it intentionally. So, Your Honor, I plead not guilty." To which the judge would then reply, "Case dismissed, not guilty." And that brings me to my next point, which is personal responsibility is the key to transforming our age from an age of stupidity into age of consciousness. So I've worked, as some of you may know that have been listening to my YouTube channel for a while and my podcast, I've worked with gang members in the past extensively. So I know it's hard to break out of a culture that, which you live in 24/7 violence and irresponsibility, rampant drug use, where problems are solved with violence, and where no responsible parent figure exists in someone's life. Or if you're a young actress in Hollywood and you surround yourself with other young adults that get blitzed out of their mind 24/7 with cocktails of cocaine and Cristal, you'll probably end up like them too. But ultimately, it's up to all of us to seize the personal responsibility to bring about the change we want in our lives. If you're the young Hollywood actress and you want to create a certain life, you have to start with looking in the mirror. And if you are just heading down a road of destruction, you have to take the personal responsibility to take yourself out of that environment. It's not really that hard to do. It just takes personal responsibility. There are plenty of people also that have all the opportunity in the world with a head start in life and all the money to do anything that they want with their life that are still doing nothing, because maybe they have all the money one could ever need but zero emotional support from their parents, and consequently are directionless in life. And if this were us, we could wallow in self-pity because the universe didn't give us the parents we wanted. We could squander our money and financial opportunity that perhaps less than 1% of the people on this planet have. Or we could take personal responsibility to seize the opportunities afforded us, not open to 99.5% of all other people on this planet, and start training in martial arts or start taking yoga to counter the lack of emotional stability in our home life. Even if we are a gang member and we don't have the financial means to remove ourselves from our physical environment, ultimately we can still choose not to seek comfort from a gang that cares nothing about us, and instead seek shelter in the dozens of volunteers that are active in our communities and willing to mentor us. So there are infinite resources that we do not choose to use when we are not in the situation we desire, and then want to blame everyone else for our lives not being how we desire them to be, because we leave far too many chips on the table and don't even consider cashing in these chips that are available to us. So I've even made previous videos in which I show clips of gang members who are smart enough to realize that their gangs were a scam. Unfortunately, only this realization came to them after they were committed some type of crime that landed them in the pen for a very, very long time. And then they said they realized their gang members were not true friends because after they were locked up in the penitentiary, none of their gang members came to visit them once in the pen, and they totally abandoned them. So in the end, the message I really want to propel from this podcast is I truly believe we can manifest the reality that we want. I'm not talking about the secret kind of garbage where if you visualize yourself driving in a $1 million Pagani Huayra, then you'll find yourself driving and owning a $1 million Pagani Huayra next year. I'm not talking about, you know, just putting out to the universe some kind of want with no mission behind your life and then receiving it. No, that's not going to happen at all. I'm talking about making the choices we need to make, seizing the personal responsibility we need to seize to move our lives forward. So even when it comes to financial issues, we cannot rely on Russia or China to free us from the slavery of fiat currency, fractional reserve, the fiat currency fractional reserve banking system, as I've heard many in the blogosphere pin the hopes of humanity on Russia and China fulfilling this role. We have to realize that we have the power to manifest this change. And only when we realize that we are supremely powerful in being able to do so will we take the necessary actions and the personal responsibility to bring about this change. So please comment below. Let me know what you think. Do you agree with my points or do you disagree? If you disagree, please don't just tell me to bugger off or call me names, but explain why. And let's get a real discourse going on in the comment section below. So don't forget to subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Click the subscribe button. Give it a thumbs up if you like it. Give it a thumbs down if you disliked it. But really importantly, if you disliked it and give it a thumbs down, put a comment below. Tell me why you didn't like it. And then if you're someone else that's watching it that liked it, then please comment to the dislike comments and explain why you liked it. So let's get a really, really intelligent discourse going, because I think the only way we're going to get out of this financial mess that we're in, where all these economies are going down the drain and all the wealth is being shuttled to the 0.1% of every nation in this world, is that we have to take personal responsibility. We have to understand that we have the power to make this change. We have to start stop relying on false prophets like Obama, like David Cameron. You know, David Cameron recently said that obeying the laws is not enough for the government to leave you alone. He said in the past, obeying the law was enough to have the government leave you alone, and today is not. So we are actively devolving and rapidly devolving into a state of tyranny. And the only way we are going to reverse this destructive path that the entire world is on is for everyone to understand the role they have to play in forming the future that we all desire. We can no longer, and we should have never, relied on the hopes of any presidential or prime minister candidate to turn around, the hopes of another nation to do the good that we want to see in this world. We have to seize that responsibility. So please do comment below. Let's get a great discourse going on in this podcast if you're watching this on YouTube. Okay, thanks a lot for listening, and as always, remain intensely curious. So long.